As the lights came on and the crowd slowly started to dissipate from the theater, I sat there thinking for a few minutes. I knew in the back of my mind that there was something definitely off, and it was not just the projector. I did have a good time, and so did everyone in the entire theater, but subconsciously I felt a strange sense of disgust, as if something sacred had been tarnished. Then it hit me. The disposable mass masala flick that I had watched for the last 3 hours or so was supposed to be a Kantara film. This was not the Kantara film most of us fell in love with. It almost felt like a special holiday festival that we celebrated during our childhood with our friends and family that had been corrupted by the hedonistic evils of consumerism and modernism. I realized Kantara had transformed itself, and that too into just another forgettable mass film. Basically, Kantara had sold its soul for mass. The how, the why, we'll get into all of that. This is the Indian Movie Critic, and let's begin. Dear viewer, let me, the Indian Movie Critic, be the Shakespeare of the postmodern era and introduce a new word to the English lexicon: massification. It can be defined as when a movie or a movie franchise is deliberately stripped of its original identity to match one that has been considered to have mass appeal, or mass as it's colloquially called these days. Be it with dumber narratives, a focus on spectacle over substance, mass hero-centric scenes, a complete disregard for physics, you get the point. This is different from commercialization, where you add or remove elements to the entity in question to make it sell better. Example for commercialization: every Bollywood remake of a South Indian film. Example for massification: the third film in any Bollywood franchise. And so I don't piss off any of my North Indian friends, let me throw Nanban in the second category as well. Oh, and if any cinephile is raging up listening to this, please remember that the Massified, Old Boy, and commercialization or Indianization is too simple of a word to describe it. To put it bluntly, or to massify that statement, basically massification involves turning any film, a regular film, into a Telugu film. Point: you think that sounded racist. Counterpoint: you assume that I made that statement in a derogatory tone. Additional recursive counterpoint: hit 3 X's. So, there is that. I guess what I'm trying to say is massified films are not bad per se, but more so it's a film whose original identity has been stripped out and replaced with a new one that ensures mass appeal, which may or may not be a good thing depending on the franchise. So every commercialized film may not be a mass film, but every mass film is definitely a commercialized film. Okay, now even I'm getting a bit confused, so can we argue in the comments and move on? Okay, now let's talk about Kantara Chapter One, which I currently consider to be the final boss of Massification. For now at least. So, here we go. The second installment in the Kantara franchise seems to have traded off what made it special, namely its original, charming, and understated semi-grounded rural action drama setting and premise, as well as its colorful cast of characters, in favor of a slightly bloated and somewhat generic, loud and aggressive historic action fantasy involving tribes, kings, and gods, all in the pursuit of mass appeal, aka massification. Kantara 2 is barely a shadow of its original self now. What was once a distinctive and self-assured film franchise contented with and then celebrated for, carving its own, smaller in scope and scale, yet novel, niche in the South Indian cinema, has been led astray by the forces of greedy capitalization. And now, where it once dared to stand tall among the oversaturated market of mass entertainment films, it has stepped down and unfortunately joined them. Whether the movie fails or succeeds, which is most likely the case, Kantara the franchise has changed forever, and unfortunately in my opinion, for the worse. Wow, that got depressing really fast, didn't it? Let's lift the mood up here a bit, shall we? Speaking of which, you know how you can lift my mood? Well, by subscribing to the channel, of course. Yes, right now, click the subscribe button here on the right side. Yeah, you got it? Yeah, okay, so let's continue. So, as I was saying in the intro block, as well as the short or the reel that I posted, follow my Insta page as well, by the way, maybe after this. So, as I was saying, despite my overall negative vibes with regards to the future of the franchise, I still had a good time with the film, and I'm in no way saying that it's a terrible film by any metric. Among the industry juggernauts that are masked to the extent of forcing me to turning my brain off, this one definitely kept me on my toes thanks to the charismatic characters, the glorious production values, the awesome set pieces, the period accurate costumes, the authentic set design, and especially the bleeding edge VFX and CG. I'll elaborate on these aspects later, but I hope that I have made myself abundantly clear, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm in any way saying that this film is not worth watching just because I do not appreciate the direction the franchise is being taken in. Regardless, you have to admit it's a bit of a complete 180 for a franchise to transform its identity by this extent. That being said, Massification is not a situation which is unique to the Indian film industry. Off the top of my head, there is the Fast and the Furious franchise, which was almost dead by the fourth entry when Fast 5 came along, crashing out of the gate with a whole ass safe full of money, swinging out of the box office, erasing any pretense of it being a franchise about street racing and stealing DVD players, especially now that they have sent Tyrese Gibson to space. So yeah, same with the Mission Impossible franchise as well. It used to be a creative space for directors, both rookies and veterans, to put their own original spin on the world's foremost espionage IP, but with the declining popularity of the franchise in the face of the MCU-led comic book movie era, it practically reinvented itself as a vehicle for Tom Cruise's self-deletion midlife crisis. Sometimes I do wonder what Brian De Palma would think of Dead Reckoning Part 2 and its AI villain. Anyway, yeah, moving on. That's the thing here, all these franchises have at best gone stale and at worst become irrelevant. Meanwhile, Kantara had its own niche and its own fan base. So why commit franchise harakiri when you don't have any particular reason? Well, the reason is simple, and for a similar trend you just need to look at an adjacent entertainment industry, the gaming space. You see, I'm a bit of a gamer, no, not that gamer, more of a PC gamer since at least the early 2000s when I was just a wee young lad using a dual core CPU and onboard chipset graphics. Since then, I have witnessed something exactly similar happening to almost all my favorite gaming franchises. The term, derogatory or not, is called consoleization, and it's the process of dumbing down creative franchises that are gaining traction in the cultural zeitgeist, especially in the PC gaming space, into less challenging games with simpler control schemes and watered down mechanics, suited for the average casual gamer on their Xboxes and PlayStations. Side note, consoleization of Kantara was supposed to be the title of this video, but most of you wouldn't get it, so here we are making new words instead. The most egregious examples are in the horror genre, where my favorite franchises like Dead Space and Dying Light, once single-player horror icons, have been streamlined into set-piece heavy action thrillers with nothing in common with the originals, except maybe the characters and the lore. Why, you may ask? Well, the same reason why Kantara is in this state right now: money. See, even with the limited budget, Kantara went on to become a cultural icon pan-India, despite its very specific South Karnataka roots and whims, and this brought in more money than the filmmakers ever imagined. I mean, a lot more. Obviously, they were not gonna sleep on something this big and had to make a sequel in order to cash in on the franchise's success, and the sequel had to at least match the returns of Kantara. And now that's a very big order. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and blame and shame the filmmakers or the studios for wanting more. It is human nature and it's the film industry. We would do the same if we were the ones making the business decisions. So now, the question they had is, how do they top the first Kantara? Clearly the novelty factor is lost, but they did have brand recognition. I mean, literally anyone who watches films in India at some point have at least come across the word Kantara in one way or the other. The solution, as the industry analysts always come to in their misguided thought process, is to go bigger, louder, and target a much bigger audience. Same as the gaming industry. But what about the subsequent loss of identity and vision which made the original hold such a special place in the hearts of those who appreciated it? Sadly, that was a sacrifice that the filmmakers were willing to make. And the result is a franchise which, ironically, despite being born as a contender to the mass appeal industry juggernaut, sadly became one in the process. Massification in a nutshell. Now, here is the thing. Unlike the gaming industry consoleization, where one of the byproducts of weaker console hardware meant a compromise in visuals for smoother gameplay, the movie industry massification leads to quite the opposite, a hyper-diabetic addition to the eye candy. And in the case of Kantara Chapter 1, the eye candy is dialed up to 11. In mostly good ways actually. Starting with the cinematography. The cinematography is pretty good, but nothing to write home about. There are some good shots here and there, some epic landscape shots as well, but it is all what you typically expect. There is an occasional letdown in this department whenever fully CG environments are on screen, where the camera would seem oddly placed at times, but otherwise it's all good. But what never lets down is the production, the set and costume designs, which are immaculate to say the least. Every set is thoroughly dressed to perfection, every prop articulately designed and era accurate as well, with some unique designs that you won't see in other historical epics. Same goes for the costumes as well, with incredible attention to detail in every item of clothing. And this is not just true for the royal side of the kingdom, but the forests as well, with the tribes and their locales designed as functional living spaces constructed with seemingly real materials, dressed down in ample amounts of mud and dirt. Quick tangent, ironically the original opened with scenes from 1849 and didn't exactly get me fired up for the movie upon first watch, as the sets and the costumes looked fake. It felt like a fancy dress party set in a vintage vacation home, if I'm being blunt about it. So what a complete 180 it has been. And we're back. Then there is the VFX and the CG. True, there are some atrocious looking environments, creatures and physics scenes, especially towards the end of the movie, that don't exactly look natural, but 90% of the time the CG and the VFX are at the bleeding edge for Indian cinema, especially for some of the creatures. There is this one scene involving swarms of these Madagascar Maurice looking creatures, somebody please comment their names if you can identify them, that look absolutely lifelike. Same goes for most of the scenes involving the tiger. As for the audio, while the overall fidelity level seems to have seemingly improved, we once again have lost the uniqueness of the original, where they combined traditional folk music with heavy rock instruments at times to create a very unique soundscape. Now, I could definitely tell that the actors were putting in a lot of effort when it comes to the delivery of the dialogues, but as a non-Kannadiga, I can't really attest to the final quality of such dialogue delivery. See, I watched the film with Kannada language and English sub, so I am not exactly in a position to critically analyze what is being spoken. That being said, my best friend is a Sirsi guy and he has confirmed that the spoken dialogue was good enough and remarked about its authenticity with respect to the era and the location. He also remarked that non-Kannadigas will be unable to appreciate some of the more nuanced dialogue and the humor, which doesn't exactly translate well with subtitles. So there is that as well. Now, as for the narrative, well, if there's one thing that has remained unchanged between the two, it's the poorly paced, meandering storyline and the complete lack of a central plot, which only magically materializes about 1/3 of the way into this 3-hour film. And speaking of the original, one thing it had a leg up over the Chapter 1 sequel, prequel, whatever it may be, are the vibrant and well-defined and straight-up fun characters. Kantara was no ensemble cast film, but the side characters, especially Rishab Shetty, I mean Shiva's friends, were a fun bunch, and the way they bounce off each other and their various humorous escapades were entertaining enough even when they bordered on cringe. Here in the new one, it's purely a Rishab Shetty show. As with most mass films, this movie more or less singularly revolves around his character, whose name I had to look up, and that should tell you enough. But despite that, he singularly carries most of the film on his shoulders and delivers in scenes both subdued as well as loud. The other actors, at least some of them, return performing equivalent roles like the henchman, the comedic sidekick and so on, but their presence doesn't exactly elevate the film, much like the original. What does elevate the film are the new characters and the new actors, especially Jairam, who I didn't know had such a big role in this film. And then there is Rukmini Vasan, who always brings her A-game. Her character is much more complex than the trailers might imply, and she does a wonderful job bringing that particular character to life. You know what? No spoilers, so let's just move on. Now, despite the massification, another thing that has surprisingly stayed on in Kantara Chapter 1 are the franchise's very strong themes surrounding class, caste, and untouchability. While not a major part of this movie, it does touch upon this briefly instead of painting our past and myths with sunshine and rainbows. I know some who have complained about its surface level exploration of this issue, but I'm totally fine with it as it is. I don't go to the Kantara films for a lecture on social justice. Another thing that I found surprising was the fact that this movie was not just contented with borrowing from Hindu mythology, but embraces it and celebrates it in a manner which is respectful, and that is a lost art these days. I'm gonna be real with you for a second here. I'm a pretty religious Hindu guy. Not an extremist, I guess, but that being said, it's one thing to be embarrassed about your own religion and culture while making a movie out of it. Cuff, cuff, Loka, cuff, cuff, X-Men. But what I hate more than anything are the films which use my religion as a crutch and a propaganda piece for marketing. Kantara doesn't do that, and I respect the filmmakers deeply for this. In fact, I'd argue that Kantara is one of the most pro-Hindu films out there, and don't let the extremists on either side tell you otherwise. And while we are on the topic of religion, I'm gonna have to make another quick tangent and note how there is a token Muslim guy in both the movies. I mean, wow, Kantara was all about that woke DI mind that's even back in 2022. And Quite hilariously, he's the one dealing with the bombs in the final action sequence in the original, where he gets cornered by goons in the bomb room, says Assalamu alaikum, and then blows himself and the goons up. Yeah, so much for representation. Okay, back onto the movie. Wait, yeah, that's it? Huh. Yeah, that's it. So, to summarize, I hope I have made you understand the problem of Massification, especially with regards to the Kantara franchise, and why Kantara Chapter 1, while an okay film on its own right, fills me with negative vibes for the future. To end on a positive note, let me just congratulate Rishab Shetty on this massive achievement of single-handedly writing, directing and acting in a movie of such massive scope and scale. And like I said, I don't hate the movie, I just hate what has happened to it. Hate the player, not the game, as the kids say, I guess. You know what? I'm not ending on a positive note. I'm still not over this. So let me just finish by saying this. One of the central themes of Kantara Chapter 1 is the greed which corrupts the hearts of good men. It drives the lead character of Rishab Shetty to make his home of Kantara accessible to the larger kingdom for profit. And let's just say it doesn't end well in the movie for anyone involved. Well, that is it then. If you have made it this far, kindly subscribe. I put a lot of effort into this video. Would be nice to know that it's appreciated. Okay then, so this is the Indian Movie Critic. For more takes that are definitely worth your time, please like, share, sub, follow the usual, and follow my Insta page as well. I'll be posting more short form content there. So yeah, that's it. Bye.